that I've mentioned, I have on several occasions worked with various individuals with similar interest in promoting mental health uh, from a domestic perspective. I am actively involved in advocating for the promotion of mental health and human rights amongst children, and more specifically amongst young girls and women. So, in my activism journey and in my advocacy journey, those are the areas that I'm mostly involved in. I'm also an SDG enthusiast, and to cramp it all together, it really does give me an opportunity to see activism and advocacy from a different perspective. So those are just some of my opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Philip. As you can see, Mr. Philip is a very, very experienced activist. And going with our topic for the day or for the evening, which is redefining youth activism and the ups, downs, and the untold stories of youth activism. Now, my first question for you, Mr. Philip, is what inspires your commitment to youth activism, or what is your story? What is the story behind Philip Zulu? What pushed you to being an activist? You talked about being a mental health advocate, you talked about children's rights, you talked about a lot of things, but what is the story behind all that? I'm pretty sure that you did not just wake up and be like, you know what, I want to advocate for this or be an activist. What really pushed you? What is the story behind Philip Zulu?
Okay,
What
thank you
is
so
the
much for
story?
that. Thank you for so much for that amazing question, Josiane. Indeed, there is a story behind my activism journey, and before I even get into that, let me make mention that I'm actually, by profession, I'm a lawyer, being trained as one. That is to say, and in the field that I am in, we are usually termed to be the voice of the voiceless, but I looked at that and thought to myself that, in fact, being a lawyer is not enough. In fact, I was an activist first before I became a lawyer, and advocating for these various fields that I mentioned earlier on, mental health and human rights and social and development goals. All of them came together and were all born from the sentiment that activism, and in fact having your voice in in a place where there is a void, actually gives you power. I have I've learned of so many told stories about how great men and women have driven change in the society on various matters and perspectives, and how many revolutions started just from a voice. And I wanted to be that voice that is driving the current change and the current wave of change that is being produced in my country and in my community. So I believe that could be the very simplest way that I can put on how my activism journey started. So it is basically the drive to make positive change, and not just positive change, but change that is going to introduce a generation where I want to live in, and where the next generation that are going to come from me and from others are going to live in and thrive in order for them to benefit from the little that we do in active advocating, and as well as putting our voices there.
Thank you so much. Amazing. That's an amazing, amazing, amazing story. You said that you are a lawyer student, and before you even became a lawyer, you were an activist, meaning you've really studied, you've come very far. Now, my second question is, what complex challenges have you navigated in your youth activism journey that have pushed you to being what you are today? What have you navigated in your activism journey, and how have you developed resilience and managed to stand strong and be the Philip Zulu that we're looking at right now?
Okay, thank you so much for that amazing question. There are quite a number of them, and they all come or stem from different sources, specifically on the issues that I am focusing at a particular time. So, being a whole-rounded human rights activist, I'm not limited uh, to talk about specific rights or active advocate for specific rights, but rights in general. So some of the challenges that I've come across, or that has shaped my activism journey, is firstly uh, the cultural sensitivity or culture in itself. It has posed a lot of a challenge for me, and it had posed a lot of challenge for me, especially when I was talking about topical issues that were considered to be a taboo in my community. Things like female genital mutilation, topics that are really overshadowed with this silence from culture. Aside from that, there's also some stigma, especially when you are a man who's advocating for women's or girls' rights. There is a lot of backlash from the community. Of course, not everyone, but then there are those in the community who would try as much as possible to pose a challenge to you, in as much as you're doing it for the community itself. So that has equally been a challenge for me, or had been a challenge for me, and it had made me to realize and that in fact what I'm doing is indeed working, because they are now able to see and they're now able to hear that there's a voice that is speaking about these issues that we're trying as much as possible to shroud in silence. The other challenge that I had is with regards to finances. No matter how passionate you can be as a mental health advocate, as a human rights activist, or whatever it is that that you are involved in as an activist, finances is plays a major role, not only in driving impactful change, but also in how you carry out yourself. If you talk about activism from the now era, you'll find that there's also online activism now, which equally requires resources in order for you to organize, in order for you to get on board on various platforms, in order for you to air your voices. There's equally a need for resources to be available. So a lack of resources does in fact pose a challenge, a major challenge when it comes to your activism journey. And then this used to be a challenge back in the day, but it is no longer a challenge. I would consider it an excuse if somebody told me that a lack of knowledge is indeed uh, is indeed a very big challenge. It is no longer a big challenge now, especially with the introduction of the internet and modernization as a whole, which has helped build resources where you can approach and equally interact with and get to know more about the area or the interest that you would like to become an activist for. So all of these challenges, of course, they're not exhaustive, but all of these that I've pointed to have influenced me in one way or the other in framing, or rather creating, the activist that you see today. As far as lessons are concerned, I believe these challenges were provided an opportunity for me to learn. I had a challenge when I was starting for imposter syndrome. Of course, imposter syndrome is in various types, but specifically for me, my my imposter syndrome was in relation to perfection. Everything that I wanted perfection to be present. In order for everything to be perfect, I never really allowed myself to be in a position where I fail, or I don't fully accomplish my goals, and that in itself posed a major personal challenge for me. But in as much as it it posed this challenge, it equally provided me with an opportunity to appreciate that in my activism journey, I will fail. And in my failure, I will have lessons, and the lessons are going to influence my latter decisions. So all of these challenges amounted to lessons at the end of the day that has tried as much as possible to teach me on how to go about activism and advocacy. I hope I have addressed your question. It was quite broad.
Thank you so much. Yes, you have addressed my question. And to everybody who's just joining us, or to everyone who's watching, we're discussing redefining youth activism, the ups, downs, and the untold stories of youth activism. Here with me is Mr. Philip Zulu, who's also a lawyer and a human rights activist, as well as SDG activist. And he just shared with us his story. And he also mentioned some of the challenges that he faced, among which he mentioned finances, which is something that everyone can relate with. As a young youth activist, one of the greatest challenges that we can ever face is finances, where to get funding. That is it's a great deal of a challenge. He also mentioned about imposter syndrome, which is something that affects everyone. Hey, speaking from experience, yes, it does. Which drives me to my next question. What, in your perspective, constitutes effective youth activism? What would you say is effective youth activism? Because you mentioned to say you got to a point where you could say, you know what, it's okay to fail, but as long as I've done this, as long as I've done that. So this is to a person who's just starting out, a youth activist. What would you say is um, what, in your view, is effective youth activism? And what are the key factors that can contribute to the success, or to youth activism being successful? What is effective youth activism? And what are the factors that contribute to the success of youth activism? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that question. So, firstly, I think I would start by trying to explain what activism really means. And activism is very different from advocacy, because advocacy actually requires you to take positive steps in trying as much as possible to implement strategies that alleviate or address the issue that you are trying to advocate for. Activism is using your voice to implement or influence social change. I think that would be the best word, to influence social change. If you're looking at it from the social setup, so if you're an activist who is just starting, and you want to understand what could be effective activism, it is when you start noticing evidence of your voice being heard. We all talk about the fact that no, we are voices of the voiceless and all that. All activists actually do describe themselves as the voice of the voiceless, talking on behalf of those who can't talk for themselves, and addressing issues that are shrouded by silence and all that. So there will actually be evidence that you will be able to note when you are an activist in a particular area. For example, if you become an activist in the area, in the political space, let's say you start advocating for inclusion, when you start noticing evidence, it could be people joining on the on the movement. It could be more conversations being had about the issue. It could be open dialogues being organized and you being invited. That is evidence of how far and wide your activism journey has actually gone. As far as uh, trying to look at factors that can help you achieve success in activism, I would firstly take note of the fact that most people who call themselves activists don't actually invest in creating an environment where they can positively contribute to the conversations that are revolving around a particular issue. They are mental health advocates or activists who have, let me say, bare knowledge about mental health. They know what depression is. Maybe they can have the clinical knowledge about depression. They could have the clinical knowledge about anxiety. They know all of this knowledge, right? But then they don't actually have the skills, the skills that they need to make impactful and effective change. So a young activist who's just starting and you want to be effective in your activism, seek knowledge first. So when you go for knowledge, you'll be able to fully understand what your why is. So if you select to be a human rights activist, that's no problem. But then try to understand what human rights are. Define your why. Yes, you are a human rights activist. What exactly are you going to be talking about insofar as human rights are concerned? Seek knowledge. And aside from that, seek mentorship. They are people who have been in your position before as just starting. There are those who have been there in the social space. There are various spaces that will give you a platform for you to air your voice to these other activists who've been in the field before. Seek mentorship. They'll be able to mentor you and groom you in you becoming an effective activist. Additionally, create a network. I've talked about networking and connecting with people, and I always say go to LinkedIn. But then when you go to LinkedIn, a lot of people will connect, and it ends there. So we need to firstly understand what is networking insofar as activism is concerned. It is one thing, Josiane, to have my number, and it is another thing for me to rely on you or to call on you whenever we have an event or whenever we have a particular a matter that would require your expertise. So when you're networking, you're not presenting a contact number, you are presenting value. So as an activist, create value. How do you create value? You create value by having knowledge. Aside from that, you create value by accumulating skills so that when you meet a person who's in the same field as you are in, or in another field that they are in, but they would require you to come on board and actually offer one side of activism, you'll be able to deliver value. That's networking. So connecting alone is not enough. So as you create your networks, make sure that you present value to the people who you interact with, especially the people who you're going to be calling upon or the people that you look at as prospective persons to call upon you whenever there's an issue that requires your expertise or your area of activism. Then, lastly, I can mention that you equally need to put yourself on continuous learning and engage in cross activism activities. So these could be, I'll give you an example. You can't talk about human rights without talking about mental health. You can't talk about mental health without talking about SDGs. So every area is linked in one way or the other. So try as much as possible to equally bring your voice in a place where there are people active advocating or actively involved in activism in one area that you are not really specialized in. Try to collaborate with them. Create a platform, a safe space for you to air out your view in the area that you're experienced in or that you want to put your voice onto, so that when the two come together, you'll be able to drive social change and make an impact on the community and possibly the global community at large. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was very detailed. So yes, that was Mr. Philip, or should I say Council Philip, and he talked about what is effective advocacy, effective activism. He said activism is using your voice to influence change. And how do you know that it's effective? Is if you start noticing your voice being heard. And he also mentioned look for knowledge, acquire skills, right? Network, and not just networking by getting people's numbers, but actually add value to yourself. And so you also talked about collaborations. Huh? You talked about collaborations, and my next question goes to collaborations. You know, as young youth activists, we tend to really want to collaborate with a lot of people, with a lot of organizations. But one of the disadvantages is that some organizations look down on young people, and if young people join
Yes, that's
in,
true.
they might want to use the young people to do most of the work and not actually get to understand or to listen from what they are saying. And so my next question is, how can intergenerational collaborations, by that I mean collaborations with organizations, with older people, intergenerational collaborations between young activists and established organizations, how can a collaboration between a youth activist and an organization foster mutual benefit, right? The word there is mutual benefit, in that the youth activist is benefiting and the organization is benefiting, not in a situation where the organization is benefiting more from the skills of the youth activist and they're not giving the youth activists an opportunity to express themselves. So how can both mutually benefit in a partnership? How can intergenerational collaborations between young activists and established organizations foster mutually beneficial partnerships? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that question. So I'll talk to two things. Firstly, uh, it is not advisable for you to rush into engaging in collaborations. It is not advisable at all. And when you do, make sure that you identify those organizations that are mirroring or that are identical to your why. I'll tell you this, they are mental health advocates or activists who are specialized in a particular niche. So when you are specialized, for example, you are an advocate, you've only been advocating about anxiety, just specifically anxiety, you create value in yourself. And when you approach these organizations, they'll be able to identify the value in itself. Don't present yourself as a fan, but rather present yourself as value. So if you are able to identify yourself as value and you're able to identify organizations that are in line with your why, it is going to be easy for you to collaborate with these organizations. Also, do background checks. It is not every there's this saying in English. It is not everything that glitters is gold. So it is not everything that looks appealing to you that you're going to expect to receive maybe maximum benefits. So you need to equally do a background check on the organization that you want to approach. What are they like? What are their policies? How is their structure? How do they work? Are there young people in these organizations? And if they are only old people, why is it so? Have they collaborated with young people before? And even when you present your ideas to them, or when you go to them for a possible collaborations, make sure that you put your cards on the table. These are the things that I'm willing to work with. Of course, you are there not as a very experienced activist or an advocate, but then you are there as somebody with value. So when you approach them with a proposal and they are willing to come on board, or you're willing to get on board with them on a particular project, let down your cards. These are things that I can work with, and these are the conditions that I would like to work under. If you're able to effectively communicate what you can stand with and what what you want to get from there, it is going to be easy for you to not only collaborate with these organizations, but equally get value as much as you are giving out. So you need to really, really associate yourself with those organizations that really agrees with your why, because we all have different whys. We all are very, very unique. So if you're able to present that uniqueness, that value, it is going to distinguish you from just being a volunteer who's there to work for the organization, but rather you're going to present yourself there as a partner, because remember the key word there is collaboration. So if you're going to collaborate, you're not going there to volunteer to work for free, but you're going there to present value. So a lot of young people get used, especially when they're just starting, because they are not presenting value. They are presenting themselves as work tools. But if you're able to present yourself as value, even the organization itself will recognize that, and they will place you at a position rather, that is going to equally give you that is going to give you benefits as well. and that's achieving the mutual benefit that you were referring to in your question.
Thank you so much. That is a big problem, especially for young youth activists. They rush to collaborations and then they get used by organizations. And yeah, the story is as we know it. Now, my next question is what innovative strategies are necessary for youth activism to remain relevant and impactful in an evolving global landscape? We know that the world is evolving. The way it was 5 years ago is not the way it is now. Like you mentioned, saying that you do not have the skill or the knowledge anymore, that's not an excuse anymore because now we have internet, we have a lot of things. And so some of the excuses that we could use then can no longer be used now. And so now we are moving, time is moving, and youth activism needs to remain relevant. Now, how can we, what innovative strategies can you recommend for youth activism to remain relevant and impactful in an evolving global landscape?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. I would quickly refer to the word that you've used, technological advancements. So, firstly, create and maintain a digiprint or your digital print. A lot of young people are coming up as activists and advocates, but they are advocates who do not have a digital print. A lot of things have moved from analog to to automation. Thus, the creation of these digital platforms that we constantly engage on. So, try as much as possible to create and maintain your digital footprint. What does that mean? When you are interacting, or when you want to, when you're trying uh, to share your message, try as much as possible to use these media platforms where young people and other persons are actually actively using. We now have TikTok, which is famously used. We have Facebook Watch, which is famously used. We have YouTube, which is basically showing you that now young people, and in fact your audience now have moved from analog to these spaces. So you need to use them, utilize them to your benefit. Create your digital footprint. If it is a Facebook page, create a Facebook page. And also understand that there are rare situations or circumstances where a person will sit and read a very long paragraph on Facebook. It is very, very rare. So understand what your audience is, what can appeal, what is appealing to your audience. Your audience is now being appealed by audio visual content. So videos like the ones that we're doing right now, a live stream, already recorded videos, these small shorts of videos, you can do those and share them on the various pages. That way you'll be able to create your digital footprint. And people, whenever they want to listen to you, or they want to listen to content, or they want to watch something related to your why, they'll just be there to key in their words, and you'll be the person that they'll be listening to. So create your digital footprint. That's mind your digiprint, and that's the first point. Secondly, no matter how much we evolve, there is a message that is being dragged along with that evolution, and that is the message of inclusion, or being inclusive in how you go about your activism. A lot of people are being left behind. A lot of people are being left behind. The issue of marginalization is still very, very much at a peak. So as you go about your activism, think about the marginalized groups in the societies. Is it women? Is it the persons living with disabilities? Is it children? And so on and so forth. Think about these people. Is it people who are from indigenous communities? Because now we have a very big outcry from this community that they're not being included, or they're not being considered in these various movements. So as you're creating your movement, think about inclusion. How do I make sure that I include people in these kinds of in my activism journey. So for example, if you want to include to be inclusive, rather, maybe let's say people who are living with disabilities, use more audio visual, because you are now trying as much as possible to incorporate these people. Go on various platforms, radios, go on TV, so that people who are not able to fully and effectively get access to maybe your social media content, they'll equally be able to benefit from your wealth of knowledge and experience. So if you go on radio, you'll be able to address people, maybe let's say with a problem with their eyes, or maybe they're blind. So you'll be able to address them on radio. If you go on TV, now these various TV stations will have sign language as a part of it. So as you're communicating, you're equally communicating with people who are living with disabilities. So try as much as possible to be very, very inclusive. Thirdly, grow and create your network. Remember, you're presenting value. So how do you present value? Present your value not to one people. It is not just, for example, me and Josiane who's networking here. No, this is not a network. So create a very big network. Create networks outside your regions. A lot of people think it is activism can only be limited, or I am limited by my society because I'm from a poor background, or I'm just in Zambia. No, create a very large network. Reach out to people in Uganda, in Kenya, in America, in Australia. Reach out to these different people in these different areas of the world. If you create your network to be so big, you'll be able to equally learn and get value addition from these people that you network with, and that you connect with. At the same time, you'll be able to not only make sure that your message is heard in your community, but also that the global community equally recognizes. Then, like I mentioned earlier on, try to as much as possible to engage in cross movement collaborations. So if you are a mental health advocate, try as much as possible to also get involved in human rights issues, get involved in social developmental issues, get involved in political issues, because at the end of the day, all of these issues are colliding. They're all focusing on trying as much as possible to drive the world to sustainability. Then lastly, persistently seek capacity building. So you do not become a master. Never become a master as an activist. Continuously, continuously and persistently seek capacity building. It could be about the same topic that you're so conversant with, but trust me, if you listen to somebody else speaking, you'll be able to identify that there are areas that are never really considered to be in existence. So if it is mental health, specifically depression, you've written books about it, you can never stop learning. Continuously engage in capacity building. It could be that the message that you're delivering is very well, but the manner in which you're delivering it is not correct. So engage in various trainings, leadership trainings, how you handle yourself, how you publicly speak, how you use these media platforms. Engage on getting as many skills as you can, because the more skills that you get, the more knowledge that you get, the more effective your activism is going to be. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Amazing. You can never be a master. You always need to seek capacity building. Thank you so much, Council Philip. Thank you so much to everyone who's watching us. We are talking about redefining youth activism, the ups, downs, and the untold stories. And we're with Council Philip, who's really, he's amazing, really. He's amazing. He's giving us all the answers that we need. We're learning a lot. We're learning a lot. My next question is, Council Philip, you mentioned that you're a mental health advocate, right? You mentioned that you are a mental health activist. Now, activism, like you've been stipulating, activism is something that really it can really need a lot of effort. It needs a lot of effort. It needs a lot of time, and at the same time, this is a person who has other things to do. For example, like you mentioned, you're a student, then you're an activist. Now, my question is, what self-care practices and mental health strategies can one employ to maintain sustainability in activism, to make sure that they're not dried up, to make sure that they're still moving, and to make sure that they're managing their mental health, because we've seen situations where this person has been against suicide. They're an activist against suicide, but at the end of the day, they commit suicide, meaning that they were not
Yes.
taking care of their own mental health, right? And so now, how? What self-care practices from you as a mental health activist? What self-care practices and mental health strategies can we employ to maintain sustainability in activism, to make sure that we're okay, even as we're doing activism, we're okay and we're on the right track?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. As you were asking the question, I remembered something a fellow activist told me. Her name is Serena Mwale. She told me uh, even even psychiatrists need psychiatrists. So even counselors need counseling. So as you go about activism, I want you to be very intentional in taking care of your mental well-being. As much as you are very intentional about the message that you're delivering, equally take deliberate steps in ensuring that your mental well-being is on point. Because if you're not okay, you cannot try as much as possible. No matter how much you try, you cannot help somebody else who's not okay as well. So you equally need to prioritize your mental health. I have one rule which is non-negotiable. If I'm not okay, I will not help anybody, because if I put myself in the position of being a helper when I need help, it is not one, it is not going to be effective, and two, I'm going to end up causing more damage than I am trying to fix. So it is better that you do not help if you're not okay. So find something that tries or that helps you offload. Of course, you have a lot of challenges as you go about as an activist, and that creates stress. You have burnout, and so on and so forth. All of these challenges are gonna be there. So try to take a load off whenever you have time. In fact, not only whenever you have time, create time for yourself to load off. We all are very different on we have different ways of relieving our stress. So try and find a way that is not only helping you relieve stress, but also helping you cope with the stress that comes as a result of your work. So people adopt things like physical exercises. So if your activity that helps you load off is physical exercise, do those exercises. Take care of your body. If you have to, go for manicures, go for pedicures. If that's what comes you, go for massage. If you can't afford it, try to incorporate something or try to create something that helps you relax. Go for movies. It's all these things that we take for granted that really helps us out. I am a Christian, by the way, and I believe God created us with the intention of being or experiencing to be human. And one of the things that intended for us to do just during creation is for us to be social beings. Of course, a lot of activists speak to themselves more than they speak to other people. So try to be very intentional in creating time for your family, for your friends. Create that time for them so that when you sit down and talk to them, you'll be able to load off your work. It doesn't even have to be a conversation about work, even a conversation about something else. It helps you unclog your mind. Take breaks as well. You are a human being, not a machine. You're running on blood and water. Try as much as possible to take a load off, because it's a lot of things. It's a lot of stress. So find what calms you down. And then, thirdly, create boundaries. A lot of the problems that we face is because we don't have boundaries. So create boundaries and prioritize. It is not every opportunity that you need to jump on. Don't get promoted on every opportunity. Wait, relax, calculate. Are you able to fulfill the role? Are you able to effectively deliver if you're put in a position that is being presented to you? Are you able to maximize on the opportunity that comes your way? Ask yourselves these questions before you accept any role, because that will help you plan properly on how you're going to be using your time. And lastly, when you're on the verge of breaking, seek help. If you find that all of these self help uh, uh, mechanisms that you have implemented are not in any way helping you out, seek professional help. It could be help from your relative, it could be help from a specialist, whatever it is, seek help. Yes.
Thank you so much. That is Council Philip, who is also a mental health activist. And he's telling us, you know what? It's not every opportunity that comes your way that you need to jump on and, and take it. This
Yes,
is
that's
something
the
that
stress of young people nowadays. You find an opportunity, you want to be there. You find another opportunity, you want to be there without questioning as to whether or not you're going to deliver, or whether or not it is going to affect your mental health in one way or the other. Because at the end of the day, you start complaining when you are the person who accepted the appointment. At the end of the, you're the one who's causing more stress and more harm to yourself. So take time, relax. There are so many opportunities that will come your way, but only when you are ready to take them on board should you take them.
amazing. Amazing. That is really
Yes.
true because, hey, I've experienced that and it does create stress. You find that you're stressed out, you're involved in a lot of activities, and you also have a lot of schoolwork and you have family issues. You are human. From the words of Cancer Philip, you are human, you're not a machine. Amazing, amazing. This has been an amazing, amazing, amazing discussion. We're talking about redefining youth activism. Here with me is Council Philip, who has been amazing. Really, I'm learning a lot, and wow, wow, thank you so much. Um, Unfortunately, time is not with us, but Council Philip, what advice would you give to a young youth activist? Without me guiding you with questions or anything, just you. What advice would you give to a young youth activist who's watching us or who will watch us? What advice would you give them? What advice would you give a young youth activist out there?
Okay, thank you for that question. I would like to start with telling you, whoever is watching this video, whoever is going to watch it, as you are starting in your activism journey, find your why. There's a lot of saturation that comes with jobs, but it is different with with being an activist. If you're an activist or an advocate, there will always be an audience ready to listen to you. Don't panic about numbers, don't panic about followers, don't panic about the many people who are experienced in that field. As you are trying to get your voice heard, there is always an audience that is ready to hear from you, because every advocate is unique, every activist is unique. The message that you deliver is different from the messages that have been delivered by other people who may be even more educated about the topic than you are. But there is always an audience that is ready to listen to you. Find your why and start working towards it. Don't rush to get into opportunities that you're not going to be able to deliver fully. Make sure that when you take stage, you deliver the best that you can. When you're addressing people, when you're trying to get your voice heard, let it be a voice, not a voice of repetition, of you quoting these big people who've talked about the issues, you be quoting Abraham Lincoln and all that. No, don't. Make sure that you keep your communication unique, because the audience does not want you to regurgitate information that is already there. Deliver a message from your personal perspective. When I was doing my lessons for book writing, one of the things that came out was that you need to tell your story. So when you're an activist, tell your story. Your why will come from your story. So the story that you are going to tell, there are going to be people who will relate to the story. And because of this, they are going to be able to hear you. You will always have an audience. Create, find your why, create your voice, and let it out. Fourthly, rather, seek knowledge. You can't be an advocate who is not informed. Be very informed so that when you come out, your voice is authoritative. Being informed does not mean that you can quote Maya Angelou, Abraham Lincoln, and all these people. That is not being informed. Have the right information with you. Statistics, have knowledge, have content, and then from there create a message that is tailored for your audience, because that is what is going to be very important in your delivery of your messages as an activist or as an advocate. Make sure that you work on these things. Fifthly, create a network of people who are like-minded. Connect with that brother in the church, with that sister in the community, with that schoolmate who believes in in themselves and telling their stories with regards to the area of passion that you've chosen. Connect with them. They are local champions, in fact, that we have. We might even have an activist in the house and you don't know. In your own house, there's an activist there who's talking about the things that you equally are facing and you want to talk to. Create your networks from there. Create your networks with your siblings. Create your networks with church members. Start small. Don't aim to be at a place where other people are, because you don't know how their journey started. Start very small. And as you start small, continuously build on it. You'll be able to reach out to your audience, and you'll be able to have your own audience as well. And you reach those heights that you want to reach. And lastly, do not seek for financial or recognition just at the start. Don't think that being an activist is you being recognized and being interviewed. That is not what it is. Don't forget your why, because your why is to communicate a voice. And when you raise a voice about something that is topical, that is very that is affecting the nation, you are shaking the nation in itself. If you're looking for interviews and you want to be popular, be a public figure. Don't become an activist. It's as simple as that. Just become a public figure or become a comedian or something. But if you want to try and drive social change, if you want to implement and drive transformative and progressive change, make sure that you take your time, take stage, and deliver. Stay within your limits, stay within your lane, be very professional as well, because a lot of us really spoil relationships with how unprofessional we really are. So work on yourself so that when you bring out your content, it is well polished and people will be able to relate to it. So that's the few words that I had.
A few words. Wow. That's a lot for a few words. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This has been an amazing discussion. I have to say that I've really learned a lot as an activist myself. I mentioned that I'm an activist for the Go Child, and I'm learning a lot. Some of the questions I was asking were like personal questions that I really need to know. And thank you so much to Council Philip. You really helped us. You helped everybody out there. Now, my last question as we conclude, seeing that if you were to go back in time, right, to when you were just starting out, you mentioned you started out as an activist before you even became a lawyer. If you were to go back in time, I know that's not possible scientifically, but if it were to be that you were to go back in time to your young self starting out as an activist, what advice would you give him? What advice would you give young Philip Zulu Jr. about activism? What advice would you give him today?
Okay, I think I'll tell them two things. Number one, keep your head low. Don't seek for opportunities that you're not ready for. That has landed me in problems before. So keep your head low. Number two, create a network that is going to help you grow. So even as you interact with people, make sure that you don't present information that is already there. Present your unique voice to them and make sure that your voice has value. I think those are the things that I would really tell myself and emphasize on. Otherwise, every other thing that has happened has actually made me to be the person that I am today, and I wouldn't change any of it. But for those two, I would really emphasize seek knowledge, be unique, and make sure that you deliver your best.
Amazing. Seek knowledge, be unique. Make sure you deliver your best. Amazing. Thank you so much, Council Philip. Thank you so much to everyone who's been watching us. We've been talking about redefining youth activism, the ups, the downs, and the untold stories. And we had Council Philip who told us his story, his ups, and his downs. And he also told us some of the things that we didn't want to know, but now we know. And it kind of thank you so much, Kanso. Thank you so much to everyone who's been watching us. What did I take out from everything? Firstly, activism is about using your voice to influence change. Find your why. Don't jump on every opportunity that comes your way, please. Prioritize your mental health. You're not a machine, you're a person. Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much to those who are viewing us from YouTube. Thank you so much, Council Philip. It's been an amazing, amazing time. It's been an amazing discussion. I've been your host for the evening. My name is Josiana Dolph, and I really hope that you will join us next time for another AYLF Youth Dialogue series. For now, this is the end of our series. Thank you so much.